In an age of kings and empires, one banker held unmatched influence. His name was Jakob Fugger. In an age ruled by crowns, a new kind of power quietly emerged: financial power. Europe stood between two worlds: feudal land power and the rise of money. The Fugger dynasty began not in gold, but in poverty. With one journey, Hans Fugger escaped the chains of feudal life. Cities like Augsburg offered something feudal life never could: economic freedom. Guild membership marked the Fugger family's arrival among the city's elite. The Fugger Empire would soon pass to a generation far more ambitious. Among the Fugger children, Jakob stood apart, quiet, focused, calculating. Venice was where money truly ruled Upper, and Jakob came to learn its language. Here, Jakob learned that money was not chaos, it was a system. Jakob realized something others feared further. Risk, properly used, creates power. Jakob returned north, carrying knowledge that would soon reshape the empire. Sigismund of Tyrol ruled rich lands poised and spent as if money were endless. Where other bankers refused, Jakob saw leverage and risk worth taking. This loan could destroy the Fugger family, or elevate them beyond kings.
Against all expectations, silver began rolling toward Fugger warehouses, turning what many called madness into undeniable success.
With Sigismund trapped by debt, Fugger did not merely recover his loan. He quietly took control of the mines themselves. Schwaz transformed almost overnight, becoming the largest mining center on Earth, powered entirely by Fugger capital. By controlling copper, Fugger controlled cannons trades, and by controlling cannons, he quietly shaped the outcome of wars. Antwerp became Fugger's window to the world, linking European industry to global trade routes and new continents. To grow further, Fugger pioneered something revolutionary: pooling capital, sharing risk, and expanding beyond a single family fortune. Mining riches brought power, but sustaining dominance required something even greater: scale, organization, and constant access to capital. In a world governed by trade and influence, choices were guided by necessity rather than loyalty.
Maximilian offered what Sigismund never could herd: discipline, ambition, and the promise of lasting power.
With Fugger money behind him, Maximilian's ambitions no longer depended on empty promises. In return, Fugger gained what mattered most: control of Hungary's copper, the lifeblood of European warfare. Fugger needed no armies. A letter bearing his seal was often enough to bend dukes and bishops to his will. In 1514, Jakob Fugger crossed a line few merchants ever had. As Fugger's influence grew, so did resentment. Rivals began pressing the emperor to curb his power. Even emperors learned a hard truth: crossing Fugger meant risking financial collapse. As Emperor Maximilian's health failed, Europe quietly prepared for a dangerous and uncertain transition of power. The imperial throne was not inherited. It had to be bought, negotiated, and fiercely contested. One candidate stood above the rest: Charles of Habsburg, ruler of lands stretching across continents. Jakob Fugger understood the reality. An imperial crown demanded money on an unimaginable scale. When the votes were counted, Charles emerged victorious, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Behind closed doors, Fugger money moved decisively, securing votes long before the election was announced. When the votes were counted, Charles emerged victorious, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. The crown brought glory, but it also brought debt. A debt owed almost entirely to Jakob Fugger. Fugger reminded the emperor of a simple truth: Without his money, the imperial crown would not exist. With emperors secured, Fugger turned south toward Rome, where spiritual authority still shaped Europe. Soon, Fugger became the Vatican's chief financier, a man many quietly called the banker of God. Indulgences turned faith into finance, and Fugger accounts quietly carried that money to Rome. Across Germany, anger grew as faith began to feel less like salvation and more like a transaction. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther openly challenged the church's authority.
Thanks to the printing press, Luther's words spread faster than the church could silence them.
To many, Fugger became the symbol of corruption, a banker blamed for selling faith itself.
By easing the ban on interest, the church opened the door to modern finance and to consequences few fully understood. Credit spread rapidly, binding kingdoms, cities, and families to debts that would shape generations.
For ordinary people, interest turned survival into struggle, trapping families in cycles they could not escape. Wealth concentrated at the top, while resentment deepened below, quietly destabilizing the entire continent. Years of debt and hardship finally erupted as peasants across Germany rose up against the existing order. What began as protest quickly turned into open rebellion, spreading violence across towns and countryside alike.
Faced with chaos, Fugger sided firmly with authority, believing stability was essential for survival.
The revolt was crushed brutally, restoring order but leaving deep scars that would never fully heal. Despite unimaginable wealth, Fugger lived plainly, uninterested in luxury or public display. His greatest asset was not gold, but discipline, an unyielding focus that never allowed him to rest. Legal threats, unrest, and political pressure followed Fugger constantly, testing his resolve at every turn.
By the 1520s, the strain of controlling Europe's finances had begun to take a visible toll.
The Reformation fractured Europe's spiritual unity, weakening institutions Fugger had relied upon for decades.
For the first time, Fugger wondered whether his life's work would survive the world he helped change.
Years of relentless pressure finally caught up with Fugger as his body began to fail him. Even in weakness, Fugger focused on continuity, ensuring his empire would outlive him.
In 1525, Jakob Fugger died quietly, leaving behind a power no private citizen had ever held.
Fugger did not invent capitalism, but he perfected its mechanisms and proved how powerful finance could become.
After Fugger, rulers learned that financial backing mattered as much as military strength.
Religious division, debt, and ambition left Europe deeply fractured and permanently unstable. Decades after Fugger's death, Europe moved steadily toward a devastating war born from these tensions. Fugger remained loyal to the Catholic Church, believing order depended on preserving the old faith. The war spread relentlessly, drawing in empires and turning much of Europe into a continuous battlefield. In 1618, decades of unresolved conflict finally exploded, plunging Central Europe into full-scale war. The war spread relentlessly, drawing in empires and turning much of Europe into a continuous battlefield.
Civilians suffered most, as hunger, disease, and displacement followed the armies year after year.
By the war's end, entire regions had lost a fifth or more of their population, forever altered. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia finally ended the war, reshaping Europe's political and religious order.
After decades of bloodshed, exhaustion replaced ambition, and Europe stood shattered and weary.
Fugger's legacy was neither simple nor clean, it was powerful, transformative, and deeply unsettling.
The peace created a new Europe, where sovereign states replaced the chaos of endless religious war.
The relationship between money and politics remains unchanged. Only the scale has grown.
Fugger did not invent capitalism, but he perfected its mechanisms and proved how powerful finance could become. Fugger's story reminds us that unchecked financial power can reshape societies, often at great human cost. 5 centuries later, Jakob Fugger's shadow still hangs over how wealth and power interact. To some, Fugger was a visionary builder. To others, he was a force that deepened inequality and division. The systems Fugger helped build generated immense growth, but they demanded sacrifices from those with the least power.
Like the world he shaped, Fugger's legacy defies simple judgment or clear moral lines.
Fugger's story matters because it forces us to question how much power wealth should ever hold.
Fugger ruled through contracts and credit, proving power does not always require a throne.
Behind the fortunes and conflicts were countless ordinary lives, altered forever by distant decisions.
The question Fugger leaves us is simple. A. How much power should wealth ever be allowed to hold?
History is often shaped not by those we see, but by those who operate quietly behind the curtain.
History is often shaped not by those we see, but by those who operate quietly behind the curtain.
Men pass, but the systems they create often continue, shaping lives long after their creators are gone.
Jakob Fugger's world has faded, but the questions it raised remain very much alive.
Sometimes, understanding history requires silence, Kurt. A moment to absorb what cannot be undone. The forces Fugger helped unleash did not end with him. They continue to shape our world today.
History does not repeat itself exactly, but it often warns those willing to listen.
Jakob Fugger, wealth, power, and the price of shaping history.